Good evening, you're watching the Chucktown Wind Report. It is Friday, February the 5th, about 10:15 p.m. Let's talk about winds and weather for the next couple of days, as we could see an interesting setup with low pressure development off the southeast coast to bring some possible snow to the area Saturday night into Sunday morning and possibly a little bit longer. But what I want to do for this forecast is divide it up into two sections, the first one being the wind forecast, and then the second one I want to talk about the chance for wintry precip and how that's going to come together. So first things first, let's talk about what's going on the surface map. Things are pretty dry right now, pretty quiet, a little bit on the chilly side tonight, as we have a high pressure ridge set up to our west and northwest, driving down a nice, cool, modest northerly flow down the coast. This should be the pattern to continue through the night. This high may drift down over North Carolina to keep the northerly flow tomorrow morning. May see some fading below 10 knots and then pick back up tomorrow day as the northerly flow commences and comes up to 10 to 14 knots. So that's going to be my forecast, is 10 to 14 knots north and northeasterly winds. We could see a slight gradient build mid to late afternoon, develop some mid to upper teens pulses, but nothing really that consistent. Now, as we get into Saturday night, we start to see a low pressure system develop here off of Florida, and then it really blows up Saturday night into Sunday morning and starts to head up the coastline. And what that's going to do is provide a wraparound northwesterly wind and really crank things up. So we could be waking up to moderate to strong northwesterly winds. Speeds are difficult to say right now. I'm going to say anywhere from upper teens to upper 20s, possible gusting into the 30s during some of its peak gradient, tightened gradient periods. So as we get below up the coastline, the winds should start to back down a little bit hour by hour, and by the time we get here and to the mid to late afternoon, winds should start to fade out pretty fast into the low teens and possibly even below 10 knots by the time the sun goes down. But that's not certain either. It just depends on how strong this low is and how fast it moves up the coastline. So that's our general look at the surface map. I want to take a look at data scope for Charleston. Here's what's going on in the Charleston area right now in the Charleston Harbor. Fort Sumter front range light, 45.2 degrees with 8 knots of wind. Isle of Palms a little bit quieter with 4 knots of wind. That's land shadowed on the offshore breeze, and that is 43.5 degrees is the air temperature. Folly Beach Pier, 42.3 degrees at 4 knots. Let's take a look at our model suite and what we are looking at as far as the winds go for the next 2 days. Here's the model suite, pretty much all in agreement for 10 to 14 knots tomorrow from 6 a.m. all the way through the afternoon on a north to northeasterly flow. So fairly uniform agreement there. And as we get later in the day, I suspect some of these numbers may start to come up as we get a little bit of a kink of low pressure off the Florida-Georgia coastline. We could see that gradient increase and see some pulses there. But things really start to crank up Sunday morning according to the NAM 12K. Pulls things up to the upper 20s, whereas the other models are pretty much in agreement for upper teens to near 20 through the morning hours, and then slowly and then fading out as we get past 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. As winds start to come down as that low heads up the coastline, and we see low teens to possible 10 knots or even below by the time the sun goes down. So that's going to be our model forecast for the area. And that's going to conclude the wind forecast portion of this forecast. So let's go ahead and talk about what's going to happen for the next couple of days. Real quick on the GRE radar, things look pretty dry right now. That's going to change tomorrow as this moisture starts to move into the area overhead. Probably won't see any rain tomorrow until tomorrow night as the subtropical jet sets up and the Gulf Stream starts to provide moisture to the east. You can see this colder air driving down from the north. Let me put a mark on that, and this is going to be key. So what's going to happen is we're going to have an Alberta Clipper set up over here, the Great Lakes, to start pulling some of that cooler air down into the area. We have high pressure set up here that's going to also pull down this cooler wedge of air down into our region. That's going to set up the cold air mass in place. So we're going to have to be watching the low pressure out here with this cold air diving down, and it's going to be tricky as to where that actual tongue of cold air is for the chance for precip. Take a look at our jet stream, and let me back up just a minute. I was looking at this a little bit ago. Here's our subtropical jet to the south providing the moisture across the Gulf. Here's our polar jet dip down into the central United States. As we go into time, here comes the jet even more, the polar jet down with the colder air as we go on in time into Saturday and even into Sunday. Here's where the jet stream really takes off. That low pressure heads up the coastline, and we have colder air wedging down into the southeast region. So one way to look at this is through the GFS model. This is just one model. There's plenty of them, but this will give you an idea of what the scenario is going to be. So as we go in time, here comes that low pressure system by Sunday early morning 1 a.m. just off the Florida coast, and it starts to slide up, and that's where we get that wraparound effect from the low pressure system, and that's where our northwesterly winds, northerly winds are going to start cranking up. But one thing we got to look for is this low right here is going to be pulling down cooler air into the country. This high is going to be also assisting that colder air to make it down into the region, and that is going to make the difference on whether or not we get frozen precip or not. So as you can see here in this one, for Sunday afternoon, we still have a freezing line dipping down into this area. So this low pulling all this moisture down into this pocket of frozen air or freezing temperatures could keep that frozen precip going for a little bit longer. But we don't know yet what the setup's going to be. We could end up seeing more of we could see mixed precip in there as well. If there's a warm layer aloft where the precip falls as snow, melts, and then refreezes, we could see some sleet mixed in there as well. So we can't rule that out. We can't just say snow because it's so close to the coastline. Our sea surface temperatures are about 55 degrees now. They actually warmed up a couple of degrees in the last few days with that warm air mass. And we just can't rule out the possibility of sleet or even freezing rain if it does freeze enough at the surface. So we could be in a situation where we're just above freezing but still seeing snowflakes, but they just won't stick. Now if we get enough of it, we could see some accumulations, especially on the bridges and higher structures. So a little bit too early to call, but the plume viewer, also the plume viewer, I did want to point out the amount of rain that we're looking at for Saturday night into Sunday is 1.4 inches, and that's associated with that low pressure system. Now as we look at the precipitation type, the plume viewer is also giving a 17.16% chance of snow. The rain potential is up here, so it's already showing up on the plume viewer as a forecast model. So here we go. This one is the GFS model, and we're looking at Sunday morning early. And this kind of gives you an idea of what the GFS is showing as we go into 36 hours, 42 hours from now, 48 hours from now. Here's the build for the GFS and even the 54 hours. Now the previous model run had that here bending further down to our area. Now it's a little bit further north of us. But if we look at another model, here is the NAM 4K model. And I want to go into time on this one and show you what this readout has as far as the precip goes. Okay, so sorry, I got mixed up there on the hours. So we're looking at 34, 35 hours from now, 36 hours from now, 39, 42, 45, and we're looking at, this is Sunday as that system pulls that wraparound moisture, and this one really actually spreads the snow pretty evenly across the coastline in about 2 to 3 inches and even builds it further inland. So this is the NAM 4K. It's a high resolution model, and this is what is showing for the snowfall potential for our coastline into Sunday. Now here's the Euro model. This one's showing up a little bit different. So here's the Euro, the ECMWF model at 30 hours. Here's at 36 hours, 42, 48. And you can see at the 48-hour mark, this is going to be for Sunday, February. This is Sunday morning. And as we go into the late morning and afternoon, this one really builds it along the coastline. So just to our north, looks like the Euro model builds the snow potentials to up to 10 inches, 10.8 inches to be exact at the highest peak area. If we look at the previous run, the Euro model actually had this up into southeast North Carolina, and now it's dropped it down into the south closer to us, where that frozen column is actually able to reach the Charleston area and drop some snow over us, and pretty much for the whole eastern half of South Carolina down to Beaufort. So that's where the National Weather Service is drawing their line as far as our snow potentials down to Beaufort and to the north along the coastline. So that's kind of what we're looking at for the Charleston area as far as snow potentials go. Nothing's for certain yet. These are just model guidances, but it looks like this low pressure system that's going to be developing off of our coastline could show some of this frozen precip meet our area, and we could see some accumulation. So we'll be watching this very closely, and if anything significant changes between now and then, I'll definitely get back on to report it. But until then, stay tuned to the National Weather Service and see what their warnings and advisories are, or watches and advisories, and if there are any warnings issued, definitely tune into them. Until then, take care, and I'll be back on tomorrow, either tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow night, to get a new report out. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching.